What up, Vibers? It's your boy Kai. Welcome back to another episode of the Vibe with Kai podcast. Today, we're getting real because recently I read this article in the New York Times magazine, and it was called "Have We Been Thinking About ADHD All Wrong?" It's an article by Paul Tuff, I think his name is, and woo, I have some thoughts, y'all. I have some thoughts. The article, which was written by Paul Tuff, it dives deep into some very bold claims about ADHD. And the big question that he asked is, have we been thinking about ADHD all wrong? And honestly, when I first saw the headline, I felt a little nervous because if you've spent most of your life feeling misunderstood, reading something that questions the legitimacy of your experiences can hit really hard. It can feel like someone's pulling the rug out from underneath of you. But still, I chose to give it a fair shot. I read it from start to finish. I read it open-minded, but I also was ready to challenge anything that I felt was a little bit off. And as I read, I kept coming back to one thing, and that is the power of personal experience. I know what my ADHD looks like. I know how it shows up in my daily life. I know how it's shaped my story. So I read this article with that lens. I was curious, but I was also protective of the people like me who have spent years trying to make sense of their brains. And while some of that article explored some of the things that in that article, like it felt thoughtful, but some of it also felt dismissive. So I want to walk you through some of the big ideas that the author of that article presented and how I honestly feel about each one. Let's talk about the first claim. The first claim, the article questions whether ADHD is truly a medical disorder. Okay. Now let's hold up here because that's a bold place to start, my friend. I get that they're trying to challenge old narratives and push for a deeper look, but let's not act like this question lives in a vacuum. For many of us, ADHD isn't just a label, it's a lifeline. It gave us a framework for things that we thought were character flaws, the forgetfulness, the overwhelm, the time blindness. And to hear someone suggest that maybe it's not real, that can feel like a slap in the face to anyone who spent years believing that they were just lazy or not trying hard enough. This isn't just a theory for a lot of us, this is lived reality. The article leans into the idea that maybe ADHD doesn't come from brain deficits, and maybe the medications don't truly address anything long term. That's a massive, sweeping claim. And look, I'm always down for questioning systems and digging deeper into what we think we know, but what we won't do is pretend the people who benefit from treatment are somehow imagining it. I take my meds every day. They don't make me a different person, but they help me function. They help me get out of bed. They help me focus and not drown in my own mental chaos. We could talk about nuance without dismissing what actually works. Let's move forward with this conversation, but yes, let's not move forward at the expense of people, of real people who are finding relief. So that was the first claim. Let's talk about the second claim. The second claim is the rise in ADHD diagnosis. It's true. The numbers have gone up, and the article frames that like it's some kind of red flag. But here's the thing. What if that rise isn't a problem? What if it's progress? More people getting diagnosed doesn't automatically mean overdiagnosis. It could just mean that we're finally starting to recognize what's been there all along, especially for folks like me who slipped through the cracks because we didn't look like the typical hyperactive kid. Diagnosis rates are rising in women, in people of color, in adults, not because ADHD is trendy, but because awareness is finally catching up. And yeah, I'll be real with you. I wish someone had seen it in me when I was 17 years old. It would have saved me so much confusion, but instead I spent over a decade blaming myself for things that I didn't understand. The forgetfulness, the impulsivity, the constant overwhelm. Getting diagnosed at 34 didn't magically solve anything, but it gave me context. It gave me language for what I'd been feeling all along. So when people look at the numbers and they say, "Isn't this too much?" I just want to say, maybe it's just finally enough awareness, enough listening, enough adults finally getting answers instead of getting shame. That was the second claim. Let's talk about the third claim. The third claim is the effectiveness of medication over time. The article dives into an MTA study, which originally showed that meds like Ritalin were more effective than behavioral interventions, at least in the short term. But then it jumps to the conclusion that those benefits fade with time. Now, here's the problem. Even the researchers say the study couldn't be controlled past a certain point. People switched treatments, they dropped off, they added new ones. So we're comparing apples to oranges at that point. The long term data just isn't clean enough to make bold claims about what does or doesn't work. That nuance matters, especially when people are deciding whether or not to try medication. I take Adderall, and no, it's not a miracle fix, but it does help. It helps me wake up and face the day without feeling like I'm already behind before I've even started. It helps me move through my to-do list with a little less dread. It doesn't erase my ADHD. It doesn't make me a different person, but it does give me a fighting chance. And that matters. Meds aren't supposed to be the whole solution. They're just one piece of the puzzle, one tool in the toolbox. And dismissing their value just because they don't solve everything, that's not helpful. That's harmful. That's the third claim. The fourth claim is that ADHD as a fluctuating condition. That's actually one part of the article that I actually agree with. The idea that ADHD symptoms can come and go or shift in intensity. That's something that I've lived firsthand. Some days I wake up and I feel like I can take on the world. I'm organized, I'm focused, I'm energized. And on other days, I'm standing in the shower trying to remember if I already, took my medicine or washed my armpits. It's not that the ADHD disappears, it just morphs. It shows up differently depending on stress and sleep, routine, even the weather sometimes. And honestly, that inconsistency is one of the hardest parts of ADHD. Because when it fluctuates, people assume that you're fine now, that it's over. But ADHD isn't a cold. It's not something you just get over with rest and soup and plenty of liquids. It's a pattern that repeats and reshapes itself. Some people think that means it's not real, but for me, that fluctuation proves how real it is. The unpredictability makes it harder to manage, not easier to manage. And just because I had a great day yesterday doesn't mean that today will be the same. Understanding ADHD as something that ebbs and flows, that's crucial. It allows us to be more compassionate with ourselves, with other people, navigating this messy, nonlinear ride that we're on. That was the fourth claim. Let's talk about the fifth claim. The fifth claim, the article makes a claim that ADHD medications help kids behave better and complete more tasks, but don't actually improve learning. And honestly, I think there's some truth there. Meds like Adderall or Ritalin, they can help you focus, but they don't suddenly give you better teachers. They don't give you a calm learning environment. They don't give you emotional skills. They're not magic. They help us sit still, maybe start the assignment, maybe even finish the assignment, but retaining information, that requires more than a pill. It takes structure, it takes patience, it takes support. And if those things aren't in place, you're just helping someone stay focused on chaos. So for me, real learning doesn't happen just because I took my meds. It happens when I feel safe, when I feel understood, when I feel supported. It happens when someone gives me time to process instead of rushing me. The article's point about the difference between behavior improvement and academic learning, it's fair, but I wish it had gone a little bit deeper into why that difference exists. ADHDers aren't learning less because we're incapable. We're learning less because the system wasn't built for brains like ours. So yeah, meds help, but support systems help more. And when you combine them, that's when the real growth happens. That's the fifth claim. The sixth claim is, should ADHD be viewed as a spectrum? Absolutely. I'm 100% on board with that. ADHD doesn't show up the same way for everybody. Some people are hyperactive and impulsive. Others, like me, might look calm on the outside, but feel like there's a tornado going on inside. Some folks thrive with meds. Others don't respond to meds at all. For some, therapy makes a bigger impact. For others, adjusting their environment, like working from home or using noise canceling headphones, that makes all the difference for some people. This isn't a condition that you can fit into neat little boxes. It's wide, it's complex, and more importantly, it's personal. And that's why understanding ADHD as a spectrum truly matters. When we try to make it a yes or no diagnosis, we risk leaving people out, especially women, especially people of color, especially adults who don't present ADHD in the typical way. I put that in quotes, the quote, typical way. Seeing it as a spectrum allows space for nuance, right? It means that we stop asking, do you have ADHD? And we start asking, how does ADHD show up for you? That shift changes everything. It creates more room for empathy. It helps us support people based on their actual needs and not a checklist. Because ADHD isn't one thing, it's a range of experiences, and every single last one of them is valid. So, what are my overall thoughts on this article? This article raised some really important questions. I'm not going to deny that. It challenged the status quo, and it opened up conversations that need to be had. But here's where I struggle. I think it leaned too hard into a narrative that risks dismissing real experiences. When you start suggesting ADHD might not be real or that it's overblown, you're stepping into dangerous territory. That kind of messaging has already done damage. So many of us were ignored. So many of us were misunderstood. And so many of us were shamed for years before getting a diagnosis. Reopening that doubt doesn't just stir debate, it reopens wounds. That said, I'm still glad that the article exists because it sparks something that we need: critical thinking. It makes us ask better questions about diagnosis, about treatment, about who's being left out of the conversation. It pushes the scientific community to keep researching. It pushes storytellers, people like you and me, it pushes us to keep speaking up. Because no article, no matter how well written, can erase lived experiences. And when we tell our real stories, we take the power back. We remind the world that ADHD is complicated, yes, but it's also very real. And we deserve support that reflects its complexity. All right, friends. It's time for tip of the week. Tip time. This week's ADHD hack is a thing that I like to call the couch rule. The couch rule. So this started when I literally sat down to rest on my couch and I forgot everything that I was supposed to do again. So now I use this rule. Before I sit down on the couch, I check my list. Not a full to-do list, just 3 bullet points. If I can knock out one more task before I sit, great. If not, I sit guilt-free. The catch, sometimes the couch wins. Sometimes I sit anyway. And guess what? That's okay. But the act of checking that list helps me pause and prioritize and then decide. If this rule backfires, if checking your list overwhelms you, try flipping it. Sit first and then set a timer. 10 minutes to recharge, and then go check the list. You do you. With that said, my friends, thank you so much for riding with me on this today. If you want more real talk like this, make sure you grab my digital guidebook, Navigating ADHD and Adulthood. You can visit my website at thevibewithkai.com to get it. It's packed with tools and truth and support for grown-ups like us that are trying to navigate our way through ADHD world, especially if you got a late diagnosis like me. And if you've read the article or if you have your own ADHD story to share, send me a DM, send me an email. I want to hear what resonated with you and what didn't, and what you're navigating right now in your own personal life. Remember, we're telling our stories now. And if you got something out of today's episode, please make sure that you leave a rating, a review, a comment. That way it helps more people find this little ADHD positive corner of the internet. With that said, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. As always, much love, good vibes. Catch you later. Bye.